right, folks, we are back. Miracle in the Mirror podcast. I believe this is our 5th episode. Once again, my name is LaJean Baggett, P2R's project coordinator or Place to Recover Training and Resource Center, also known as. And then today we have a new guest, Amy. Amy, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Amy, and I'm a peer support specialist, case manager, and co-facilitator for the financial literacy class. And I also do morning meditation at the Serenity Inn with the ladies at the Sober Living House.
Hey, Amy, thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate you coming out and being willing to share your story. So, as always, we jump right into it. So, walk us through your sobriety journey or your recovery journey. How did that addiction start for you?
Well, I'm so thankful. I'm 3 years clean and sober. That was a journey in itself. And my addiction really began at a very early age. I believe that I had, the disease of alcoholism, but I didn't put my first drink or drug in me until I was about 14, and then I really pursued it at 17. But I was adopted when I was 2 and came from South Korea.
Okay.
So my adoptive parents were both Caucasian, and the schools I went to were predominantly, white, with a few black people. I knew one other Asian person that was in my school. So from the very beginning, I didn't have a sense of belonging, not knowing anything about my biological history or family. And at my core, my belief system was always, I was garbage, I was unlovable, unworthy, unwanted, and I never really shared those feelings with anybody. I just held them in. I had no sense of who I was whatsoever. I just watched as I went, and I was learning from other people what they were doing. And in my mind, fear was always at the center of all my decisions. So growing up, I had a pretty good childhood. I cannot complain about that. My mom and I are very close. She was so loving and caring, but I couldn't feel that within myself. No matter how much she loved me and cared about me, I couldn't feel that in myself. So I kept searching and searching. What I would say is I was hustling for my worthiness my whole life, low self-esteem, wanting to belong and fit in. And how I describe it is fitting in is showing up and trying to be somebody else, and then belonging is showing up and being able to be your full self. Well, growing up during that time, I couldn't be that because I didn't know that. All I wanted was, to make my parents happy, to please them. I was afraid of being abandoned again, so I would always have, fears of being sent back to Korea, or just being not wanted. And, so that was pretty much how it began.
Okay, so you felt like those things directly translated into your addiction or when you started using?
Absolutely. I was a late bloomer, so all my friends were beginning to do these things early on, and fear was protecting me in those moments. But I did pick up alcohol my first time, and I remember we were all going skating. It was New Year's Eve, and I was 14, and oh my gosh, I got drunk really bad, and I remember throwing up, but I had enjoyed that moment because it was changing the way I felt. I was so uncomfortable in my own skin all the time.
Okay.
So when I first picked up drugs and alcohol, it was all to change the way I felt on the inside. And what it did for me is it allowed me to, forget all those fears. It took away all of those uncomfortable feelings of uncertainty, and it allowed me to not care about what everybody else was thinking about me, or being able to please my parents or do this or that. So it really began with the experimentation and then just wanting to fit in.
And do you think that the drugs and alcohol also played a role in that fitting in or having almost like a sense of community? Because when you start doing those things at a young age, you're not doing it by yourself. Somebody else introduces you to it, and then that's the thing that you find that you have in common, and you found a community in that, which, am I following along?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So my addiction really began just smoking weed, drinking alcohol, tripping on acid. And those were fun times. Those were before I became a full-blown addict, which I didn't know I had a disease. At that time, I could pick up a drink or a drug and I could put it down and continue on. I ended up graduating high school and I had met the father of my children before I graduated. So with him, he sold drugs, and it was exciting and fascinating to me because my entire life, like I said, I was hustling for my worthiness. I was performing. If I just get good grades in school, if I do well in sports, my parents are going to want to love me and keep me and all of those things. So when I started picking up the drugs and the alcohol, and it allowed me to not care anymore, my mind completely shifted, and I said, you know what? I'm just gonna go in the complete opposite direction, live this fascinating, interesting, dangerous life. I just met the father of my children, well, the future father of my children, and he lived a totally different lifestyle, came from a totally different background, and it intrigued me. And I ran off into the sunset with him until it wasn't,
Yeah, that's how it happens. So I know that you are a huge advocate for women, huge advocate for mental health. But before we jump into that, I want to talk about your sobriety and the healing part of it. So when did you start taking your sobriety serious, and what did that look like for you?
Well, it took a long time to get to the sobriety piece to begin with because, like I said, when I got into that toxic relationship, 2 years in, that's when I got pregnant with my first daughter. And luckily, I, stopped doing drugs. I was smoking weed at that time, and I stopped doing that, stopped smoking cigarettes. And luckily, I had a beautiful, healthy baby.
Mm-hmm.
And then I picked right back up afterwards, and I started experimenting with harder drugs, because like I said, they were in our homes, he was selling them,
Mm-hmm.
we were living that lifestyle. And after I graduated and we moved in together and I got pregnant, in my mind, all I wanted, my dream was to have children who knew their mom, and to not come from a broken home, because when I was younger, my adoptive parents, they divorced.
Okay.
So I saw
So that was a part of the trauma too.
Yes, absolutely. And there was some abuse in there too, as well, with other family members, and I witnessed that, and that was traumatizing in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, as I got pregnant with my older daughter and we were living together, that's when the domestic violence really started. So it was just this vicious cycle of drugs and feeding my disease, and then the violence, and then the little honeymoon stage where I'm sorry, I'm gonna change, I'm not gonna do that again. And I truly believed it because I wanted to be a family that was together.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted my daughters to know who their parents were. I wanted to show up and be the best mom I could be, but I couldn't do that because drugs and alcohol took everything from me. I became powerless, and when I got into the harder drugs, it took over. Really, opiate addiction is what did it for me.
Okay.
After I had my second daughter, that's when I began opiate addiction, and it took me down really quick.
Okay. Before we jump into the next piece, and thank you, Amy, for being, so open and vulnerable and sharing. If you are currently a victim of domestic violence, please call the number below. There are resources available, not just at our agency, but several agencies across the county. I'm going to drop a national number that you can call if you need to get some help in regards to domestic violence, or if it doesn't even just have to be domestic violence. So we talk about all kind of abuse. People hear abuse and they think, oh, that's just somebody hitting me. No, I'm talking about financial abuse, emotional abuse. There are so many types of abuse. None of them are better or worse than the other. They're all forms of abuse, and they should all be looked at that way. So if you do need help, please utilize the resources. Check out the information dropped below. And again, Amy, thank you for sharing. So while you were in the home and the domestic violence was going on, along with, the drug abuse, and I'm sure there was, stress with the pressure of the kids and things like that, do you feel like, were you being pressured into the drugs at any time, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, I take full responsibility for the things that I did when I was in the grips of addiction, but I saw, because, he was selling drugs and doing all of that, I saw what the opiates were doing to the people that he was serving, and in my mind I said I didn't want to do that. I knew that, anything that I had tried, I really enjoyed it, and I knew that if I had done that, it was going to end badly. So yes, I was pressured for probably a few years until he finally got me to do it. And once I did it, like I said, opiates were my drug of choice. It's what my body loved. And I just completely went downhill very, very quickly. We started losing things like our homes, our cars getting repoed, living in hotel rooms, living in other people's homes. And at that point, I couldn't understand what happened, because I didn't understand that I had a disease, number one, that it was an addiction that affected my mental health, my emotional being. So I didn't know that. I didn't know that I had an obsession in my mind, and it kept telling me, just feed me at any cost. I lost the ability to be able to care for my children the way I wanted to care for them. They are my most treasured, valuable beings ever, and I love them infinitely, but like I said, my addiction would not allow me to show up and be the highest version of myself.
Okay. So, at what point, or was there anything that happened specifically that you can recall where you're like, you know what, I gotta get clean, I gotta get off this stuff, I have to change my life?
Absolutely. So, like I said, after we started losing all those material possessions and things that we had built up, we were staying with another person, and I just looked at the whole scenario, and I looked at my children, and I felt so much shame, guilt, and remorse, because my kids were not in a safe space. And that's when I called my mom and I asked her, can you please come and pick up my daughters? They cannot be in this environment. I know that I'm a very sick person right now, and that I do need help. And graciously my mom came, and my children, they didn't want to leave me. They were crying, I want my mommy, and that was so difficult for me, because
I'm sure.
it was like my mom had to peel them away from me when she was putting them in the car. And it was only supposed to be for the weekend, but you know how it goes. I'll be right back, and that's 2 weeks later, a month later. And then at some point I had to go to court, because I gave her custody of my kids, because that was the best thing for them, and I knew that I had to do something to get help for my disease. And that's when I first was introduced to recovery. I went to detox. I got introduced to a spiritual program of recovery, and I didn't even know there was help out there. I literally thought I was going to die that way,
If anybody out there knows somebody who may be in a similar headspace, or thinks that there's not help out there for you, listen to this woman's story. I think all of our stories that we come across at P2R, of course, are all very impactful, but this girl's got a hell of a story, and she walked a really tough journey. And I just commend you, Amy, for everything you've been through, and where you're at now. So I believe you said you had how many years sober?
I have 3 years
3 years sober.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. Okay, sorry, we got off track, but
That's
go ahead
okay.
with your recovery.
Yes, and I just want to say, I have been in and out of recovery for about 15 years now, and what I didn't realize is, I had surrendered so many times to a spiritual program, taking actions, building up a support system, showing up, doing what I needed to do, but I didn't realize I had so much deep trauma within that was affecting me, because it was almost like our minds protect those parts that are so painful within us. So
or suppress it.
Right. So eventually those things started to come up to the surface, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to hold space for my feelings, how to release them, how to process things in healthy ways, how to talk to somebody else and be fully vulnerable. So these are the things I learned as I was coming in and out, and in and out. And eventually, this past 3 years, it has completely opened up my eyes to what I needed. And I walked through trauma therapy for a couple years, cognitive behavioral therapy, along with growing spiritually. You know, it was all of the things combined that helped me to be here. But my connection to my higher power, there's so many labels for higher powers. I refer to this power greater than myself as God, the spirits, the supreme love, divine consciousness, whatever. It's that feeling, that experience, knowing that we are all connected, everyone and everything. This power is within us and everywhere at the same time. You know, and I'm very grateful to be here because the father of my children, he was actually murdered in 2009.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
Living the lifestyle, and I'm very grateful that my children and I were not in that home when that happened. You know, my heart aches for his family and all the people involved in that, because this disease and this lifestyle ripples outwards so far and wide, and it doesn't discriminate. It affects children and families and communities.
Absolutely,
you know?
Absolutely. And that's a big part of it, right? Addiction doesn't just affect the person who is using. Like you said, it reaches far. And one of the things that I admire about you the most, Amy, is how much you prioritize your healing, right? It's not just about going to treatment, going to the meetings, the 12-step program. The thing that's underlying for all of it is your mental health. Right? So I know that's something that you, like you just said, you've taken very seriously, and that's the root of it all, right? I think that's something that the community needs. It's something that the community needs to hear as far as focusing on people's mental health even more. So I do want to go back to something that you mentioned a little bit earlier, because I think, of course, in a area or a space where we serve marginalized folks or minorities here, I want to hear about what your experience was like as a Korean American woman in predominantly white spaces. Do you feel like you, in trying to find that sense of belonging, do you feel like you face like racism throughout the years? Because I know when people say racism, they just think black against white, and it's not just that.
Right.
So.
No, absolutely. You know, I experienced racism my whole life growing up, getting made fun of, you know, being stereotyped as, oh, I'm very smart in math, or just many different things, or commodity to, you know, certain movies and little things that they said in movies. Just so many things that happen from a lack of education, from a lack of information, from a lack of learning other people's cultures. You know, racism affects so many different ethnicities and races, and, you know, in different ways. So yes, I have experienced that, and I continue to experience that in different ways. But today I know better how to process it. I know how to deal with it, and today I have a voice where I can stand up and speak up for myself, because growing up, I was silent. Like, I didn't know how to use my voice. I didn't know who I was, you know? And life is a journey, so we're always constantly learning and growing and evolving and letting go of things that don't serve us anymore or serve others. So, you know.
If you didn't know already, P2R, or Place to Recover Training and Resource Center, we are an inclusive nonprofit agency, so it doesn't matter what race, religion, culture, male, female, LGBTQIA+, does not matter. We accept everybody, and we encourage everybody to come to us, especially if you are in need of our services, or to refer anybody to us. So don't think that, oh, we're just serving a certain group of people, because we're not. We want to help and touch as many people as we can. So going right into P2R, Amy, tell us how you came to know about P2R. Did you come, I'm not 100% sure, did you come on as a client, or what did that look like?
Well, I first met Wendy many years ago, about 30 years ago. Her and my mom worked in the justice system for their entire employment. So I've known her. I showed up to the open house of P2R, and that's when I met Felicia.
Okay.
And she was in Louisville, and we had some of the same experiences with recovery in Louisville as well. So that connected us, and I ended up becoming a client to help Felicia learn a little bit of how to do surveys and the process at P2R. But I also wanted to support the Life on Life's Terms group. So anytime Felicia was running a group, she would call me on the phone and say, hey, do you want to come to this event? And I would always show up and come because it was important to me to, number one, support Felicia, my friend, support the women coming there, and to be a part of the community. It's all about connection. It's all about belonging. You know,
Absolutely.
we are hardwired for that. And to support P2R in any way I can, because that is my purpose. That is my calling, to help people, to help the underdog, the people who are overlooked, that fall through the cracks, that people just push to the side and don't think twice about them, you know?
Absolutely. So for those who don't know, Felicia is a peer support and intake specialist at P2R, also works closely with the women in the Serenity House, which is a sober living house that we have for women there, and then the LOLT groups. It's Life on Life Terms. It is a women's sober support group. So I know those ladies get together about once or twice a month, and they have something going on. So we encourage you to come and join us and to see, you know, what's on the calendar, what you can fit in your schedule. If you do need to have some kind of, if you're sensing like you're feeling like an outsider, or you feel like you may need some sense of community or want to be around other women that have gone through similar circumstances, please, please, please come and join us, or give us a call at 440-434-8033 to get more information. So, Amy, you were actually coming as a participant at P2R. You were a client. You participated in the LOLT support group. So, how did you become a staff person? How did you become an employee?
Well, first, Felicia, I had called her up because I was needing a job, because, you know, being in recovery, you have a lot of wreckage of your past. So I had to deal with that and face it. And, you know, some was personal, some was financial, some was living amends. So I needed employment, and she connected me to a cleaning service, and I got the position immediately. So I started working there. I worked there for about a year. I had completely finished all my amends financially, worked my way out of debt, and did all of those things.
So did you go through the RIO program?
No.
Okay, you didn't go through the RIO program, but you did actually get an employment referral from P2R.
Yes.
Okay, who was your case manager there? Was it Felicia?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yes.
All right, I just wanted to make sure I was connecting all the dots there. All right, so you came in to P2R as a client. You participated in the support groups. You got an employment referral there. So how did you go from being referred to employment from P2R to actually becoming employed at the agency?
Well, it was actually perfect timing, because Felicia called me up and said that they're doing a Fresh Start funding program through Ohio Means Jobs.
Okay.
So to go there and to sign up. So I went to Ohio Means Jobs, OMJ, and I signed up. I just missed the orientation that day, so I had to wait till the next Wednesday. I went to the orientation, and you know, you have to do a little bit of paperwork and stuff to see if you have to do the 1 week or both weeks. So at the end of that, I only had to do the second week. So I went back for the second week at OMJ, and it's basically teaching you soft skills, you know, resumes, how to perform in an interview, and then I took a bunch of tests. But after all that was done, I had to sign up on an application, and it was exactly 4 months of being unemployed from my last job that I was eligible for the Fresh Start funding program. And that opened up a position at P2R for me. So that's how I went from client to working at a cleaning service to being part of the family and team at P2R, which I'm so grateful for.
Yeah, it's really fulfilling work. So everything you do at P2R, I know you wear a couple of different hats as well. So you're peer support specialist, you do the financial literacy class, you assist with doing motivation or meditation and motivational speaking to the women at the Serenity
Yes.
Inn. Anything else? Did I miss anything?
And just case management and
Okay.
working with clients. You know, when I first started working there, I learned the intake and receptionist area because that's where all the calls come in. That's where it begins. So I was very lucky to learn that process first, and then I moved on to learning case management and how to do the process with that. And you know, when you're working with somebody one-on-one and you're actively listening to what's going on, watching their body language, you can feel other people's energy, you know, in a room. And sometimes things aren't being said because they're suffering so much, but you know, it's saying more in their body language than their words. And being able to, you know, see that and feel that and give our clients a safe space. So many people come in and they start crying, you know, they just start being able to tell it all because they just haven't had that space to do it in. So there's always a box of tissues in there, you know, and I always tell our clients, this is a safe space. You're allowed to feel your emotions, you know, let us know what's going on. We're here to walk with you through the process because for me, I don't know any other agencies out there, and I know there's plenty that help in specific areas, but we do a lot in so many different areas, and we walk with the client through. We don't just say, hey, go fill out this application and turn it in. No, we help them fill it out because a lot of times people don't know certain things, and we have to learn together. So that is definitely fulfilling for me. You know, that is my purpose, is to be of maximum service to anyone out there in a way that's going to be beneficial for them, not to enable them, but to help empower them so they can have freedom and independence and learn how to be self-sufficient yet be a part of a collective.
Absolutely. And the independence is a huge piece, right? A lot of times I feel like it's a fair statement to say that people may seek us out and think that, you know, oh, well, they're just going to turn my whole life around and they're going to do all these great things for me, which we are, but we are walking beside you. That means you're walking your own journey on your own, and we are assisting you as needed. But it's so important for us to continue to promote that independence, because P2R is not always going to be there. You know, the phone lines, you're not probably going to get an answer to a phone call after 4 p.m. You may not always be able to call up there and talk to your case management. So it's so important that you can do some of those things and learn some things for yourself while you are on your own. So before we go ahead and wrap up, Amy, I do want to have kind of a call for action, because this is so important. Amy, I want you to, if you can, just look in the camera, and if there is a woman out there who's watching who may be facing domestic violence, who may be feeling like they don't have a sense of belonging or facing some type of addiction, what advice would you give them?
I would definitely encourage them to seek help, because when you're powerless, you don't have the power to change your life, you know, and it takes a village. So I would encourage someone who is suffering like that to reach out to P2R. We can connect you to addiction recovery services, mental health services, sober living houses, you know, just support systems in general for men and for women. You know, we can help with employment with people who have blemished records, but you know, we have to start first things first. So if somebody's suffering from addiction and all of those things, the first thing they would need is to go to detox and then to go to treatment. And we do have those connections and services. And then once that's done, we can follow up and meet with the client and see, okay, what's the next step on the journey? Housing, you know, getting their license in a vehicle, establishing some type of consistent employment. Then maybe, let's say a woman, you know, had lost custody of her kids and needs, you know, is in that position and stable then at that point to be able to do things to help get their children back, and that reunification. You know, we walk the whole way with these people until they say, okay, I have received everything I need to be able to stand on my own 2 feet and do this. So, and then we are going to have a reunion too for the financial literacy class to see how the progress is of the people who came to our class. You know, those tools are so important, and everything we teach in that class is you know, the co-facilitator Jermaine and I, we've lived it and we've done it. We've came from the bottom and now we're here, like Drake says.
So I mean, so one thing I want folks to take away is, you know, we've talked about all different types of circumstances, life challenges, and scenarios. I think everybody would agree there's probably not many life challenges or circumstances that we have not come across at P2R. Right. We have seen it all. So don't think that my story is, you know, my situation is just too big or they can't help me, or I don't think that way. And that's why we are a pillar in our community and we are a resource agency, because 9 times out of 10, you name it, we got you. We know what direction to point you in. There's a specialist at the agency. We just talked about going from, you know, mental health referrals, detox and sober living referral to a financial literacy class. This woman is one of the facilitators to our financial literacy course. So even if you may not be facing, you know, addiction or that particular type of circumstance, and you say, hey, you know, my life financially is in shambles, that is something that we offer. So I strongly recommend anyone who may be facing any of those circumstances to please give us a call and reach out. Amy, thank you so much for everything that you do at the agency and for being here with us today and sharing. Thank you to our viewers that are at homework, wherever you are watching this, for continuing to stick with us. We will have more stories coming. And again, if you need anything from P2R, give us a call. Thank you, guys.